Welcome to this session on innovation and collaboration, implementing technical assistance programs in the off-grid sector. Before I introduce the panelists, myself included, permit me to outline the session's objectives. First, why technical assistance at an investors forum? What TA is effectively the earthworks that develop the foundations upon which financial architecture will ultimately rest. When investors have concerns, and we've seen from the earlier sessions, they have many concerns, it often reveals the greater need for technical assistance. In effect, we're not producing the market stability and preparedness required for investment. So the purpose of this session is to demonstrate how different off-grid technical assistance initiatives and organizations are increasingly innovating and collaborating to enhance outcomes. We will not achieve universal access by 2030 if off-grid solutions are not a big contributor to that end. However, while there are pockets of excellence and blueprints for hope, our current trajectory remains will leave us significantly short of our targets. We operate in a sector almost permanently characterized by downcast statistics, as David Lecoq reminded us in the opening session. Unlike financial markets, we don't experience the highs and lows, the bull and bear alternations. Instead, we seem to be pushing uphill all the time. 750 million without electricity, 600 of those in Africa. We need apparently 160,000 green mini-grids to power 350 million odd people, and by 2030. At this point, we've got 1,500 mini-grids with another 4,000 planned at only an investment of 7 billion. So we are way short of our targets, and this is a toxic number soup, if you like. But as mentioned countless times in previous sessions, we cannot stare passively at the number count. We need to act, and we need to do so more effectively. The organizations represented here, and there are many more that are not, are all trying to innovate, trying something new to achieve more from less, to do it faster and more effectively. This session is a chance to present and discuss some of the more innovative strategies and new thinking that organizations are adopting to do things differently and ultimately ensure that we take back control of the numbers and keep our targets within range. So before we proceed, let me introduce the panelists. Christelle Adongo is the UNDP Regional Manager for the African Mini-Grid Program, AMP. Samuel Bonya is Project Coordinator for the African Forum for Utility Regulators, AFUR. Bhumika Tiwari is Technical Advisor for Get Transform with a focus on regulation and market development. My name is Robert Aitken. I am the African Market Mini-Grid Acceleration Program, or AMAP, Program Officer. AMAP is part of SEFA, which is a multi-donor special fund managed by the African Development Bank. Just for the sake of context, just to bring the audience in, I'll ask each of the panelists to share a little bit about what their organizations do, their objectives, etc. This will then be followed by a discussion around innovation and collaboration, and we will head into a Q&A after that. Okay, so an early glimpse of innovation amongst this group is that I am both moderator and panelist, so we are doing more with less. Okay, from an AMAP point of view. Hopefully that works, yes. So just quickly introducing AMAP. AMAP is the African Market Mini-Grid Acceleration Program. It's under SEFA, as I suggested, run by the African Development Bank. We are a technical assistance facility. It's a 4-year program. We're in the 4th year with possible extension into the 5th. It's a $7 million facility, and we are focusing broadly all on the entire ecosystem of technical assistance. So where it's needed, we offer it. So with the objective is to de-risk markets, to open up markets for further investment, but we understand that to do so requires support on various levels, and that's reflected in the program design. From an operational point of view, we have 3 pillars. The first of these is opening new markets, which is largely focused on building capacity and providing services to the public sector to facilitate market readiness. The second pillar has to do with finance, where we have invested in developing various instruments, an RBF instrument, and possibly a guarantee fund, the instrument associated. And we look at providing technical assistance to developers around raising capital, particularly financial and legal support in that regard. So that's pillar 2. And pillar 3 is more focused on supporting developers. There's a lot of challenges. We know that from a finance perspective, having to adjust all these sort of tools to the market realities, and a lot of that has to do with the current status of developers. So pillar 3 looks at innovative ways to support mini-grid developers to get over the line, to become more bankable, to become more investable. And in doing so, we look across the ecosystem for different ways to support developers. So let me leave it there. So that's the AMAP, that's the African Mini-Grid Market Acceleration Program. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Christelle, who's going to tell us a little bit more about AMP. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So indeed, we wanted to also present the Africa Mini-Grids Program. It's the largest energy access program implemented by UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, largest in terms of countries because it has 21 participating countries across Africa. And the way it is structured is that it has these 21 national projects and then a regional project, which I belong to, which acts as a coordination, advocacy, and knowledge platform for the program. So overall, the objective of the program is really, it's a technical assistance program primarily, even though we also implement mini-grids on the ground. There is a part of the funding which is for mini-grid pilots in all of these 21 countries. But then, we really want to also transform the sector through our technical assistance and really make sure that we can increase the financial viability of mini-grids. That is a key objective, and reducing cost as well. So we have so the way the national projects are structured are a bit similar across the countries. They look at policy and regulations, innovative business models. So this is the part where we have the pilots, scaled up financing as well, and we have also a key component on digital. And so the program has started in 2022. It is now going until 2027, and not all the national projects started at the same time. So we have now 10 national projects already under implementation. And most of them are actually here in Lagos. So because we coupled this event with specific sort of workshops for our AMP community. So you will see T-shirts, caps of the Africa Mini-Grids program. This is our group, and they're welcome here. Oh, sorry.
Hello? Yes, okay, it works now. Also, good morning, everyone. I'm from Get Transform, and Get Transform is also a technical assistance facility. It is funded by several European donors, and we are a global program in that we are operational both in Africa and in Latin America and Caribbean. We work primarily through country windows, and we have 5 country windows in Africa. These are Mozambique, Uganda, Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini. And we work along 4 different, what we refer to as work streams. These are long-term energy planning, renewable energy grid integration, on-grid regulation and market development, and off-grid regulation and market development. So really covering the entire spectrum of what it takes for energy sector transition. And that's what GET stands for, Global Energy Transition, basically. And yes, and there are off-grid regulation and market development component. Our focus is primarily on mini-grids, and we are looking at basically different regulatory and incentive blocks for the entire mini-grid ecosystem. So starting from, say, data diagnostics under electrification planning related topics to regulatory frameworks, be it mini-grid regulations, sub-regulations, technical standards, and then also looking at incentive mechanisms for auctions-related support. We have worked on all these different topics in all of our different countries, but also at a regional level with partners such as AFUR here. This is what we have been doing at Get Transform. Thank you.
I could say I'm the odd man out here. I'm not exactly a technical assistance facility. I'm more of an organization, or representing an organization called the African Forum for Utility Regulators, which brings together utility regulators on the continent. When we talk about utility regulators, we're talking about regulators in the water and sanitation sector, the transport sector, the communication sector, and the energy sector. So yes, I'm here in the capacity for the energy sector. So the regulators, their voices are heard through AFUR. It makes it easier for us to speak to the various stakeholders out there, and that's what we do as AFUR. We try to give a voice to the regulators who are often, some people would say, forgotten. Our aim is to bring together these regulators to exchange ideas. I know very many of you know about Uganda being on top of the ERI, but how is that so? And so our aim is to push Uganda maybe to share its ideas with the likes of Lesotho, the likes of South Africa itself. So the knowledge exchange, the exchange of ideas and policies and things like that, we encourage that. We also do a number of projects on behalf of our regulators, because if you look at AFUR, we're kind of divided into the various sectors, which I labeled. But then even amongst the regulators, you'll find those who are multi-sectoral, so you'll find they cut across. So we have 5 different sector heads, and so we managed to pull off projects for each and every one of them. And one of our main projects is to do with mini-grids, and we have been working quite a lot with, I would say, everyone here, from Get Transform, the UNDP, and even the AfDB. So we do quite a lot of work.
Excellent. Thank you, Samuel. So that's the background of all the organizations represented here. So maybe we're gonna move into a discussion around some of the issues, particularly around innovation and collaboration, and what we are doing as respective organizations to get over the line, really. So maybe the first question concerns, what are we doing differently? There's perhaps what we can do is share some examples about perhaps the different technologies, the different types of solutions, new thinking that's enlivened our initiatives, and enabled us to do more, really. So maybe shifting over to panelists, if I can maybe address that first. So what we've done at AMAP is we competitively procured, so I can name the names, but so Vida and Odyssey have been doing some work for us in 3 countries, Angola, Cameroon, and Mauritania. And it really is a very useful service in a contested space. I mean, I think we can't progress, whether it's mini-grids or other technologies, we can't progress without site selection. So that's been key for us, using geospatial analysis to identify, in our case, suitable green mini-grid sites. In other organizations, they might be looking at different technologies, but a similar sort of approach can be adopted. So, and for us, green mini-grid sites, it's a hotly contested area. There's a lot of political influence. There's different sort of regional interest groups, and also there's simply not enough knowledge about where these locations lie. So for us, using the country sweep and prioritizing a number of mini-grid sites, and to be able to do so on your own terms, you're selecting the right parameters, whether it's 10 kilometers from the grid, or we're looking at more than 100 or 200 households. They've also got features. I'm sure maybe other platforms have the same, but we could also use Nightlight as well to double check the distance from the grid. So that's been incredibly helpful. Yeah, so I mean, in some of those countries, we selected up to 50. We prioritized 50 green mini grids based on a country sweep, and then the next thing is to do some kind of feasibility. I mean, those are that's the sort of baseline potential, really. And so what VIDA and Aldous in particular start to do then is a pre-feasibility to look at the roof count. I mean, I know VIDA was presenting earlier. Look at the roof count. Start beginning to estimate the demand, to be able to do almost a bill of quantities in terms of the distribution layout, system sizing, and all that sort of thing, techno-economic feasibility studies. So it really is a lot of information and a lot of market intelligence about the potential of these sites in these countries. So that, yeah, I mean, that has been incredibly useful. There's also other issues. I think it was Cameroon, we could also overlay the data with conflict zones. So we could say, look, these are, there's conflict in these areas. We'll never get private sector to invest in those sorts of areas, not in the short term. So we can overlay that data and say, look, any of these potential mini-grid sites within a 10-kilometer radius of these recent conflict zones, we exclude. So it really is quite manipulable, and yeah, it's been very useful for us. It also, in some cases, I mean, it's not really its function, but it did reveal, that the existing data around particularly grid infrastructure was incorrect. That actually the nightlight, which is taken, by satellites, revealed that, the polygons that show where the nightlight is were sort of south or north or east or west of the supposed existing grid line. So it's also a good verification means. So no, I think, yeah, so using those sorts of technologies and the e-tendering, which we're also using in Guinea, and the kind of the remote management and the sort of the digital opportunities, it really has brought a new dimension to a lot of aspects of technical assistance. So, Christelle, maybe if you can just talk a little bit about AMP and how you've also been doing these sorts of, new initiatives. Thank you.
Yes, so actually AMP is really built on a history of mini-grid projects that UNDP has been implementing for a decade or so. And so in the past generation, before AMP, these projects were really developed individually at each national level. They were mostly funded by the Global Environment Facility, who is also our main donor now for AMP. But really, we saw from the sort of the headquarter or the regional level a lot of missed opportunity for exchanges between these countries, because we could see they faced similar challenges in the implementation, but there was no mechanism that had been really designed, when these projects were formulated to allow and to facilitate these exchanges. So when we designed AMP, we really wanted to do something, very intentional from the beginning, so that these countries that are part of the program can have this exchange and learn from each other. So this is how the regional project now came in. And also, the other thing we did also is to join forces with partners from the beginning. So from the beginning, we actually are partnering with the African Development Bank in AMP. They are implementing the Madagascar and the Angola national projects. And we also are partnering with Rocky Mountain Institute. Well, now it's RMI, formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute, who are our partner for the regional projects. So this also helped a lot. And with this framework now, we could really go into having this communication and not only just always do sort of a top-down approach, right, in terms of guidance and so on. And this is also why the program includes what we call this community of practice. Again, it has existed before. There are other groups, there are other communities that are out there for mini-grids. But here we really have national projects which follow, a similar structure in the way they have been formulated, which also work on very similar activities, even though, of course, we took into account country specificities. We have very different markets in AMP, from very large markets like Nigeria, Ethiopia, DRC, to very small ones like, Eswatini, Sao Tome. But still, nevertheless, we really try to find a way to sort of standardize a bit the approach and to make sure that what we develop from the regional level can speak to all these countries and that they have this platform to exchange. Though I think I would say this was maybe the most prominent innovation compared to what we did before.
not the most friendly one there. Yeah, at Get Transform, something new and different that we are quite excited about, and actually we presented this in a smaller session yesterday as well, to dig deeper and provide a demonstration for the participants who attended this session, is the Africa Model Mini-Grid Regulation tool that we actually also collaboratively developed with AFUR, and Samuel has been very involved in this work, which has been ongoing for almost now a year. And as I mentioned earlier, we at Get Transform have primarily worked in this country window setting. And for instance, we did a lot of mini-grid regulatory work in Uganda, also in Mozambique, by ourselves, and also in collaboration with some other actors there, for instance, Brio in Mozambique. And really, the idea in developing this together with AFUR was also how do we bring this to a wider set of stakeholders, and not just the few countries that we work in. And what is, because of course, I mean, mini-grid templates, for instance, or regulatory templates have existed before as well, but what is really innovative about this tool is that it's not really one size fits all. So it kind of caters to different ownership structures or business models, be it, for instance, completely private owned or completely public owned, or somehow split asset model, and so on, and allows for generation of 8 different scenarios. So you can actually, using this tool, depending on the kind of answers or input that you put into it, develop 8 different sets of templates. And these templates also, we didn't just start from scratch. They also build upon previously existing knowledge within Get Transform itself, but also other organizations like IFC, and also to some extent AfDB. And is really like a culmination or compilation of the best existing practices out there that we want to bring through this one platform and this one tool to the wider set of stakeholders. And what is also interesting with it is that even if you do have already existing regulations, just going through the tool is an interesting exercise, because it allows for, at each stage, you are asked different kinds of questions along with guided notes on, in terms of the kinds of structural and procedural aspects that you want to have in the regulation, the kind of, for instance, technical aspects or tariff considerations or service quality standards or monitoring sort of topics that really allow for a lot of iteration for the user, that, well, in most typical cases would be the regulator. And that's what's really, I find, is innovative about it. And, well, maybe Samuel also would have something to say about it.
Thank you, Bhumika. Just on top of what she has said, for example, this the innovative way we worked on it is the fact that we involved who we would like to call the owners of the tool itself. In this regard, it would be the regulators, and they did provide knowledge on it based off their different experiences in their various countries. So you will find that with this tool, it doesn't exactly focus you and say, you must do this. It gives you an idea of what you must do. It also reduces what ideally would take 1, 2, or even 3 years to do, to a space of even 3 months. So that's for us something that's innovative, that eases processes, that quickens the way business should be done, or that regulations would be formed. But even just away from that mini-grid regulations generation tool, at AFU we took a step further, and we came up with what we would call the mini-grid tariff settlement tool. And this is more like, you would call it a standard. It's not exactly as standardized, because different countries have small different aspects that affect their environments. But we found that we needed to find a way to, as much as possible, standardize what is happening in terms of the tariff methodology when it came to mini-grids. And that's something that we came up with. We have piloted this in 5 countries. We involved, I could say, all the stakeholders here. They looked at that tool before it became ready. we involved the regulators, and not just the full members, even those who we like to call observers. So we had 14 countries deeply involved in the use of in the development of this tool. But when we went away from that, we had to go to 5 countries, and we went to these 5 countries where we got even policy makers. Those are the ministries of energy, the rural electrification agencies, and in some instances, the ministries of finance involved in the training and the use of this tool. But also working closely together with the private sector. These are the likes of the Africa Mini Grid Developers Association, AMDA. It was able to break that barrier of you create something and it just stops there, but it gives a lot of ownership because there was a lot of consensus building, which is something new and novel that we discovered over the use of this, over the development of this tariff tool. But even over the development of like the generation, the mini-grid regulations generation tool, that was something that came up. People felt that we own this because we were part of the process of coming up with this. And we felt, and we still think that's something that we need to keep building on the continent.
Excellent, thank you, Samuel. I think any conversation about regulator participation is music to our ears as technical assistance organizations. I mean, they really are the gatekeepers, and if we can keep them and developers and financiers happy, and we can start moving to more systematic solutions, I think it's good for the market generally. So thank you, thanks all. So I think, what we're looking at there are sort of, tools and technologies and other kinds of solutions that we've sort of integrated into how we work and how we work more effectively. So I want to switch it over a little bit and look at, from an organizational point of view, look, we've all been doing this for some time. We've paid our school fees, we've made our mistakes, and we should be getting better at what we do. So I want to shift it a little bit to ask the question, as organizations, directly or indirectly involved with technical assistance, how have you adjusted your strategies? What have you learned? What have you needed to change? What's worked? And instead of me answering that question first, I'm going to suggest Christelle will go that way and we'll come back so it doesn't look like I'm both. Thank you.
Yeah, no thanks. Yeah, I think I already spoke a bit about the standardized sort of approach we had in terms of structuring the way the national projects are structuring, what they are focusing on. I think one aspect also we learned is that it really needs to be holistic in a way. You cannot just work with government and not really, address the issues that developers are facing at the same time, or that the fact that financiers actually don't know really how to evaluate a mini-grid project and how to finance it. So this is the approach we took in AMP also. That is why, the national projects, even though we know, we are humble, we are not a huge program, and so we have limited resources, nevertheless, we try to have very targeted activities on providing capacity building to also these other players, like developers, financiers, and of course, our primary sort of, beneficiary is still the government. They are the ones implementing the projects in most of the countries, and they are the ones benefiting from our capacity building. So this was like sort of at the national level. And at the regional level also, we have also tried to really provide various, tools for capacity building now to the national projects. We are developing knowledge tools, really making sure also here we don't reinvent the wheel. This is why these partnerships are so important. There is already so many resources out there. But what we do is that then we take them and we make sure that, they are sort of curated and disseminated to our audience, right, in our community of practice. Then we can also, besides this, we also have now tailored technical assistance. So that means in specific countries, they will come back to us and say, oh, but we are facing this particular challenge. And then we can deploy international expertise. There are very good experts out there who have seen how to do that in another country and can bring it now on the ground and make sure this is advancing. And through the community of practice now, this is really our platform for dissemination. determination. Another aspect we've now included, which again was not there 10 years ago, is digital. So Robert already also spoke a bit about it. We are not so far yet. We haven't yet procured a particular system, so I cannot mention, such or such name of a platform. But what we've sort of inbuilt in the program, every national project is going to install a digital platform at the national level to monitor the performance of the mini-grids that are going to be installed, the pilots. And then this data that is going to be collected at national level will then be connected right to a regional platform that we will be having at the regional project level, and that will now gather and aggregate all this data. And then at our level, of course, then we can extract knowledge, we can see how all this data can really benefit the sector. So this is also, something we learned from the past, that data is very important. I think you are all aware of that, and we are trying to make the most of AMP given the large number of countries.
Okay. So in terms of new approaches, we are constantly thinking about how to introduce new strategies in the work that we do to make sure that we achieve our objectives. But I think what I could really speak about today is something that we also piloted very recently, earlier this year in February, and this is sort of a new methodology that we refer to as the policy catalyst. And as I mentioned earlier, again, at the cost of repeating myself, we have been working in these different countries, but at the same time, we are constantly also thinking, how do we scale this knowledge, and how do we also bring about more harmonization and develop further complementarities with not just within GIZ projects, but also with other actors in the sector, like also on this panel, for instance. And these were sort of the thought processes that led to the development of this approach that we refer to as the policy catalyst, where the idea is to basically provide more integrated capacity building together with implementation support in a more structured manner. And over a longer period of time, so say, for instance, anywhere between 12 to 14 months. And this would be something that would, and as we go along, it wouldn't be something that we do just in one-on-one with different countries, but something where we would invite a cohort of different countries, a group of regulators, utilities, ministry personnel who can come together to form a cohort and go along with us on a kind of learning journey, so to say, on different regulatory segments, be it mini-grids, but also be distributed generation or renewable energy effective tendering and so on. And at the same time, we do constant check-ins with them and needs assessment based on which we can provide more effective implementation support to these partners. And this is something actually we started already with distributed generation, where we are collaborating again with AFUR and also with Sustainable Energy Africa and with APUA. And also launching another window for RE effective tendering together with SMAP that would be coming up soon. And as I mentioned, like, the idea is not, again, also what Christelle said, to reinvent the wheel or to recreate the knowledge, but to also develop partnerships. So this is why we have these partnerships with AFUR or with SMAP or with IRENA and with SEA, with Sustainable Energy Africa, where we want to work with pre-existing knowledge and pre-existing templates, which we can then, through the medium of Policy Catalyst, bring to larger networks and create also a lot of peer exchange, which we find to be quite interesting as well, because, I mean, this is also something Samuel mentioned in terms of the development of the mini-grid regulation tool, but also the tariff tool, where it's good to create these channels of exchanges as well. Oftentimes when we have worked with regulators or ministry members in different countries, we also get feedback where they want to know, okay, what are these other countries doing? doing, how have they approached it, and it's good to kind of bring them together, and that's also what the approach is under Policy Catalyst, to not just do this one-on-one, but together, and it's something that has actually, in our experience, proved to be very informative and successful in a manner of speaking, where we got very good feedback from the participating countries under our distributed generation segment. With mini grids, we have not yet started, but this is under conceptualization, and the tool that I mentioned is also something that we would streamline through the Policy Catalyst mini grid window. So yeah, this is sort of a new and a different approach that we are now taking towards technical assistance, basically. Yeah.
When it comes to AFOR, and very many, Christelle, Bhumika have both hinted on it, when it comes to things of peer reviewing, we have, at AFOR, we have actually encouraged that. We still encourage that with all the, we call them knowledge products that we come up with, the tariff tools and things like that. We're encouraging more and more people to review that, because we believe we're not the only ones with the knowledge, and that there are more, usually there are more qualified people who are more experienced, that can look at something and point out that you can improve here. So that's something new that we are trying to do. But aside from that, as an organization, we have looked at these various collaborations, because through the peer reviews, we have managed to come up with collaborations. I can tell you, Get Transform looked at our tariff tool. That's how even the idea of this generation tool for the mini-grid regulations even came up. UNDP did the same. AfDB did the same. You build a wider network of people that you can speak to. You find that we are so many people on the continent who are all trying to address one question, but we're doing it differently. And sometimes it's better to turn to the person who's addressing part of that question better than you, and just offering them that, your network, which is what at AFOR we have discovered really works well. Our members, I can tell you, various regulators are hungry for knowledge, but everyone here has knowledge in different capacity. And I can tell you, with Get Transform, we did quarterly webinars. That knowledge was well received. UNDP, their knowledge products, our members are hungry for it. The regulators are always eager for knowledge. Same thing goes for AfDB. This knowledge is there on the continent, but we need to work together. And that's something that we are trying to do at AFOR. And we have found that our members prefer to get this knowledge as long as they understand that, okay, it has been brought to an African context. And that's something that we always keep trying to do as AFOR, that, yeah, the African context has to be put into this various technical assistance and the knowledge, and it comes out well. And the feedback always comes through to us that we liked this, can we improve on this? Because I can tell you that African regulators, African policymakers are hungry for knowledge, and they really want to take their people further. And the only way to do that is by receiving this knowledge.
Thank you, Samuel. Just if I can just add something to that about new sort of strategies. So what we've done at AMAP is we're in 8 countries, providing technical assistance, and we need to be more systematic. So we've sort of looked at something, sort of sensitively standardized, if you like. We know that there's almost a sort of a fixed number of barriers, to, well, in our case, green mini-grid development, and, countries present a sort of a different mix of these barriers. So what we had developed as a sort of a regional contract was what we call a MAP framework, a sort of a market acceleration program. And in that, it's a sort of a ready-to-go sort of toolkit. So in there's the sort of the kinds of terms of reference, if you like, based on to outline the work that might need to be done. So it's sort of preloaded. So all these terms of reference, whether it's about policy support or regulatory support or finance related or planning or site identification or all those sorts of things, we have developed these terms of reference. So we could sort of consider them 90% complete. So they're ready to go, to be adjusted where needed to particular contexts. So we've got these terms of reference. We've also developed training materials, particularly for regulators and policymakers, but more broadly as well, that cover the key issues, and we've got them in 3 languages, English, French, and Portuguese. So that's also part of our sort of resource toolkit, as well as a collection of templates and tools, a basic tariff tool, a financial model, a concession contract, a service agreement, and all those sorts of things. So it's, we kind of know, we do believe that the countries are more similar than they are different, but we acknowledge the differences at the same time. So what we do is we have an initial diagnosis. So we go in and send a consultant in to evaluate the shape and state of the sector, and from there it's a sort of decision-making tree, and we then go to, look, we're going to need to deploy this kind of expertise or this sort of technical assistance, and we have that kind of preloaded, if you like, that particular terms of reference, and we can go to market easier. And if in that process, in the diagnostic, it's an assessment about capacity building requirements. So we have the training materials, which we're going to discuss a bit more as the conversation evolves. So we think it's we think we need to get better and more effective and a little bit more standardized in country preparation strategies. So we have developed this map, and it's going to be, we use it. We've piloted it in Madagascar, and we've looked at it in other countries. And we're still working on it, but I do think it's a framework that might guide market preparation strategies, just make things a little bit easier through a level of standardization without crushing the idiosyncrasies and differences. So yeah, I mean, I think what we're saying is we're trying to learn, sort of running repairs, if you like. We're trying to get better at our job. And we are increasingly relying on different sort of strategies and techniques to get where we need to be. So I have a third question. And I mean, what I've noticed in conversations, particularly since AMAP is a technical assistance facility, we can support various activities in different countries or across regions. And a lot of people are interested in, say, what about more training? Let's do more training in this particular area, this number of people, and those sorts of skills. And there's a lot of money and there's a lot of support or investment going into various technical assistance activities. And we always kind of ask the question, how do we know that's the right place to put the money? How do we validate? How do we verify what we do? So, I mean, I think that's the sort of next round of discussions is what do you as an organization? I mean, there's so many sort of opportunities. There's so many ways to do it. The numbers can vary. Are we training 100? Are we training 1,000? What sort of impact is this going to have? We don't want to be, we want to be efficient about our resources. We want to be accurate about our solutions. So I guess the question is, if you could just sort of discuss how you sort of validate and define and determine what it is you need to do as organizations. So maybe if I can start with Christelle.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, especially now when we deal with GEF-funded projects. As you may know, the cycle between the design, the time it takes for approval and so on, and endorsement before implementation. Sometimes there are 2 years that passes between when it was formulated and when it starts actually, and you have a project team in place. So there is always this question, and the mini-grid sector evolving so fast. Now, is it still relevant what we had planned in design phase? What has changed since then, and so on? So I think, yeah, we have different mechanisms we've tried to address this question. One is we have almost all national projects are actually conducting or planning to do a national dialogues on mini-grid delivery models. And the idea here is really to create a stakeholder platform, a multi-stakeholder platform, like a working group, which gather all key relevant stakeholders in the mini-grid space in a country. So you will have, of course, the government regulator, you will have the developers there represented, you will have, of course, the financiers. And the idea here is really to discuss, okay, so currently, today, now, what is really preventing the sector to scale? What are the challenging? And we look really more specifically in the delivery model, because this is always the key sort of element that will determine also a lot of other parameters, like what kind of regulatory framework do you need, and so forth. And so we are really trying to discuss now, issues around who owns the asset of the mini-grids, who is going to finance them, who is going to operate them. And this is usually not necessarily, either not so well defined, or we know that the current model, there is a model here, but it needs to be evolved, it needs to be somehow modified to really bring, the scale we need and allow the sector to grow. So this is what we are trying to do. And we also know that we really take the country where it is, and the objective is to try to get to some form of national consensus on what is sort of the optimal delivery model. There can be also several, but usually, it goes to one specific delivery model that is really appropriate to a particular country, and that can now really, answer these questions and lift some of the barriers. And the national dialogue also goes, of course, then once you've sort of defined this, it also then leads to define, so what needs to be done to get there. And this is where you also have an opportunity, once you know that, to now do adaptive management, in the project, at the project level, and say, okay, we had thought we would need to do this particular activity, but in fact, based on the outcome of the dialogue, it would be more relevant to do something else. And usually that's possible, right? At a project level, it's not overly complicated to do these changes. And that can really allow to address the issue of these changes. Another element, maybe just quickly, and that also builds a bit on what you explained, Robert. We also have a bit of a diagnostic that we call DRE. So it's an acronym that means de-risking renewable energy investment. So it's a methodology that has been developed by UNDP over like 10 years. And the idea here is also to look, so it's in a way a bit complementary probably to what AMAP is doing with the country diagnostic, but looking much more really in depth into what are the key risks that the private sector is facing when the private sector wants to invest in mini-grids. And so we have a categorization, and so basically through, again, interviews, targeted stakeholders consultation, we get a bit of a view on what are the key risks, and that gives you, again, what would be the key policy measures that should be implemented by the government to address these risks. And that is kind of a starting point as well to see now, to work more on, with the government on what are the key activities you sort of as a project, as for instance an AMP, what could you do or what could you adjust to make sure this sort of address these risks that you have identified. So we have these tools, and that's, and again, these activities are done in almost all the national projects so that we have a good view on where this stands at the beginning when it starts implementation.
Thank you. Yes, it's true that we want to do more and more and more, but also that we don't always have endless resources. Resources can be limited, and then we always have to prioritize or optimize and think about how best to address the different issues or topics. At Get Transform, the way we are set up, we have so to say, country coordinators and technical experts who form part of the country team itself. So we are quite connected to the regulators, to the utilities, or to other ministry departments and other public sector agencies that we are working together with and have quite continuous, constant dialogues with them on an ongoing basis. So we can always check our priorities, what are the topics that they are interested in, what are their greatest needs at the moment, and how can we best address these. But at the same time, although we are a program in ourselves as Get Transform, we are part of a broader umbrella program that's called Get Pro. And within Get Pro, we have the African EU Energy Dialogue, which is anyhow quite high level, but provides also a lot of priorities in terms of what are high level topics that are of more interest at a certain point in time and have regular dialogues, for instance, with African Union Commission. And at the same time, our sister program, which is Get Invest, has a lot of collaborations across different territories with the private sector. So they provide private sector support to companies to get them to finance readiness, for instance. And so they have a lot of knowledge in terms of what's really going on in the markets and on the ground. And we have regular consultations with them as well. And through this channel, we also hear of different priorities from the private sector. So what I mean to say is that it's quite holistic in the way that we are getting different information from different segments and different interest groups, which really allows us to then decide on what our best approach is, or what are the best topics that we should be taking up at a certain point in time. And for instance, when I was mentioning these windows under Policy Catalyst, I mean, this was also based on iterations together with Get Invest, where we understood from them that there is a greater need at this point in time in the captive power sector, for instance, and the mini-grid sector, for instance. And on our side also, we had a lot of expertise, and we had worked in our different countries on these topics. And so this is how we decided that, okay, these should be, for instance, the first windows that we roll out under Policy Catalyst. So yeah, this is basically how we are approaching prioritization, for instance.
On the side of AFO, we usually do what you would call periodic needs assessments. We have over 40 members, regulator members, as members of AFO, and different members have different needs. So you'll find that over time, and we did one of our needs assessment together with Get Transformed, so we found different topics that the regulators wanted what you'd call capacity building on. So there you know, okay, this is maybe what the next project should be about. This is the capacity building or the technical assistance that the members most need, where you find that on average, maybe 30 of the members hint on one subject, the other 10 hint on another. So you know how to structure them, how to put them in a sequential manner, where you know, okay, we'll start with this, go with this, and probably end with this. The other thing that we do is we interact a lot with, for example, I mentioned AMDA. We interact a lot with them, and because they hear what the private sector is doing, we get an idea of the areas that the private sector feels that the regulators are lacking on. And we take that back to our members, and our members say, okay, maybe we can do something on that. So we build on that. So that way you're not just bringing each and every single thing in terms of technical assistance to your various members, but you're bringing something that is important, something that will benefit the entire sector as a whole. So that's pretty much how we do it at AFO.
Okay, thanks, Samuel. I mean, I think at AMAP and SEFA, we look at it similarly. I mean, I think just to repeat what Christelle said, I think one of the challenges in these programs, you know, whether it's AMP or AMAP, despite the acronym challenge, is that you know the idea comes you know a long time before the intervention is made, and I think you know despite the fact that the numbers don't seem to be reducing in terms of the challenge, it is a dynamic space, and you know and opportunities are evolving. So I think we have to sort of continuously reassess you know whether what we intend doing is really what ought to be done. And I think, you know, from one of our issues was, you know, under Pillar 3, we had a certain budget allocation for mini-grid developer support. And I think at the time going in, and again, this, you know, this is probably, you know, this thinking probably happened 2 years before the program got approved. And now we're in year 3 or 4, so we're 5 or 6 years into it. You know, would these assumptions still hold up? So what we did, and we weren't certain about it, and it actually referred back to the whole sort of training thing. I think one of the offers was we would train 2,000 people, but why 2,000 and what people and where and for what purpose sort of thing. So what we did to sort of clarify, you know, we wanted to make sure it was market driven. that we're not sort of imposing a solution conceived in an office 6 years ago on the sector to no one's benefit, and not ourselves either. So we had and also when you have conversations, Samuel was talking to AMDA, the African Mini-Grid Developers Association. If you talk to individual organizations, you have to kind of do your own analysis. They're going to say that's and not all the mini-grid members or developers are members of AMDA. I mean, as AMDA's doing a great job, but that's just the reality. So what we did is we had a company do a market needs assessment. So they went and they spoke to loads of developers, mini-grid developers at various stages of maturity, because I think those requirements might differ from startups to more established. They spoke to organizations, UNDP's AMP, AfDB, amongst others, AMDA. So we had a proper market scoping exercise to decide, what does the market really need in terms of developer support? And it was interesting. I mean, some of those assumptions that we had about the 2,000 people being trained, very quickly fell away, and what emerged was more sort of ESG frameworks that were more accessible to mini grids, obviously compliant with financiers' expectations, and I think it's also something ARE is interested in as well. And then also, other issues such as, we used to run the Green Mini-Grid Help Desk, so to revive that and refresh it to, be fit for purpose for an evolving market, which was, interesting for us, as well as, which didn't quite fall under Pillar 3 because, it's more sort of a Pillar 2, well, sort of a bit of a cross, but also technical assistance for particularly startup companies around, business management. And it's been a constant discussion, in all the sessions about capacity. I think, Zhao Kuna from SEFA mentioned it in the earlier session yesterday, that, the capacity isn't there. And that was something that came out quite clearly in that market needs assessment. So we're also looking at putting together a sort of a terms of reference or means of support to enable, not so much absolute startups, but developers that have 1 or 2 or 3 mini grids under their belt, sort of thing. And we're looking at how to provide legal and financial technical assistance to those organizations just to get them over the line or around the corner type of thing. So anyway, I mean, that's what AMAP is doing, and we're all doing sort of different things, but I think we all approach it similarly. We need to, our resources are limited, our time is limited, the numbers are mounting. Whatever we do, we have to get it right, and it has to be market driven. And then you sort of break it down over time, and we start sort of discussing different aspects of it, and Samuel on another issue as well, and increasingly we sort of see it differently. We don't see it as AMAP, tightly ring-fenced, and we do what we do, and AMP does what they do, and as and when we need regulator guidance, we'll approach AfDB. I mean, it's far more iterative, it's far more discussant. So, I mean, that's actually my next question I want to put to the panel is, maybe you could just discuss a little bit, because the way I see it is, collaboration is the basis of innovation. We're here to talk about innovation, but I think collaboration has a big role to play in that. So maybe just, for the sake of the audience, and us, if you could just say a few things about AMP to start, what are you doing in terms of collaboration, and then we'll go around and I'll close that out. Thank you.
No, thanks, Robert. Yeah, indeed, and I think we are all aligned on this, that really collaboration is key and not easy to do either. So that's always, you have your own sort of planning and work plan, and then sort of it's difficult to sometimes to adjust. But yeah, I think for AMP, there are different, it's also, again, at the 2 levels. We have partnerships happening at regional level that can then benefit the entire national projects. And then, of course, also at national level, the individual now projects also now liaise with partners through, again, the dialogue I mentioned or other avenues. We also have our country offices, UNDP country offices. They have been in the country for decades, so they know also very well the ecosystem, and that is also helping. So more specifically now for AMP, what we have discussed recently with AfDB, for instance, being together in the program, was to create a joint technical advisory committee. The idea being to gather, a limited group of experts, really, key players in the field, key partners that can now sit down for, every other month or so. And then we can present what we are doing. We can keep them updated on what both AMAP, AfDB, AMAP, and AMP are doing. And then that has two advantages. I mean, first of all, of course, we get feedback from the the key players in the field, but also by doing that, we can also now more easily see what are the areas where we could potentially overlap, where we can really make synergies, and so on. So this is one of the mechanisms we've put in place. And the other one is, of course, also now through the community of practice, led by RMI, and a good example is now this week. As I mentioned, we are combining both being here at a public conference, so exposing all our national projects to all these now, key stakeholders in the space, and at the same time providing capacity building to them and making sure this is also, really effective. So that's the, a few examples of what we are trying to do to be more effective in terms of collaborating together. And maybe also just to mention that we've also been, of course, discussing with, Get Transform and AFUR, especially on the tools they are developing, which are fantastic for us, for our community of practice, because we keep having questions, how do you calculate tariff, what are the good methodologies? And then suddenly we find out that, AFUR, together with partners, has been developing like the model tariff tool for mini-grids after consulting all the players, reflecting all the best practices. So that for us is wonderful. Then we organized webinars with Samuel presenting to all the groups. And of course, when countries are more interested, then, AFUR, Get Transform, or others can now really go maybe and do a deeper dive training, in the country, for instance. So this is, the mechanisms we try to set up to collaborate.
Yes, I mean, as Christelle mentioned already, we have a lot of these monthly meetings, not just with AMP, also bi-monthly meetings with AFUR, to really keep in touch with the different players out there in the sector, to hear from them what they are working on, what are the different topics that we can have more synergies on. And I mean, it seems also as if we are holding sometimes these different puzzle pieces. Like Christelle said, there are sometimes questions about tariff, and then AFUR has this tariff tool that basically could fit in very well. And I feel also this Africa Model Mini-Grid regulatory tool that I talked about, and also Samuel mentioned earlier today, is going to be one of these big puzzle pieces that we will do this together collaboratively, of course, with AFUR, where we will roll it out and support in terms of implementation in as many countries as we can reach, but we cannot reach all the countries that are in need. And then there we can have other collaborations with AMP, for instance, or even with AfDB, for instance, or others out there, and are quite happy for them to take it on and adopt it as well. And we, for instance, plan to do a wider peer review, for instance, that would come with a webinar, and then we will share it with whoever is interested in looking deeper into it and providing us with comments. And after that, once it is published, then it's there on the website. We will host it on the AFUR website, and it would basically be there for anybody to use it. It wouldn't be just something that Get Transform or just AFUR are going to provide implementation support on. And just beyond the tool itself, I mean, for instance, we have different kinds of setups and collaborations. As we talked earlier, it's not always possible for just the one organization to do everything. We don't also always have all the expertise just under one house. And so, for instance, we are also an implementation partner together with RETA, which have other organizations who are also part of this pool, for instance, World Bank, SMAP, or RMI even, that Christelle here mentioned is partnering with UNDP. And through this medium, it's also possible for us to, in case we receive a request that we are not able to cater to in that moment, we can pass it on to other partners through the RATA platform, and vice versa. So if they receive something that they are not in the moment able to address, then they can also look towards us, towards Get Transform, to see if this is something that we can take over. And since we are also here and with AMP, another aspect that I just thought of, for instance, UNDP will be launching a mini-grid grant window in Lesotho, and Lesotho is one of our countries where now, in preparation to that, we are basically going to be providing capacity building training and reviewing also the existing mini-grid regulations, also in light of the regulatory tool that we have developed. So kind of workshopping together with the stakeholders there so that, they have enough knowledge and the most up-to-date knowledge to engage better with the incoming grant funding window. So these are, for instance, several different ways that we are collaborating across the board, basically.
It's pretty much like Christelle and Bhumika have said. For us, it's more about we have members. Christelle has a network. Bhumika has a network. Robert also has a network. We all have different sets of skills, so it's about tapping into one another, and that's something that we realize as AFO, that we can't do everything alone. You'll be stretched if you try to do everything alone. But if you want to reach so many people, you'll look for someone who probably has more experience than you do, or who even has a wider network. It's pretty much like Christelle said, we presented our tool to their country windows, and that went well. At the end of the day, you would have found that probably the countries would have ended up reinventing a wheel that already exists, and that's a challenge. Furthermore, at AFU, we are always encouraging and looking forward to our regional partnerships. We have partnerships with the likes of RERA in Southern Africa. We have partnerships with COMESA. That way we can reach a lot more people with the work that we're doing. We can also, in the collaborations that we do with our partners such as Get Transform, UNDP, and AfDB, we see that if you have these regional partnerships as well, you can tap into the technical assistance and spread it to a much wider group of people. So that's something that us as AFO, we continuously keep doing.
Thanks, Samuel. I think at AMAP, we're working on something quite interesting, and it's an event, or we're going to pre-pilot it here, UNDP in the lead. But what we had is we had a set of resources, and I think this is a sort of a great sort of collaborative story. So AMAP had developed these training materials as part of our map toolkit type of thing. But they're passive until you need them, unless you act on them now. And we got chatting, I think it was Christelle and I, or maybe all three of us, Samuel as well, initially. So, we've only got sort of 8 countries, and perhaps not all those 8 countries require this kind of capacity building. Whereas, so we've got the resources, we've got the training materials in different languages, etc. But AMP has access to 21 countries. We don't have access to 21 countries. And AFUA has, membership, regulators are members of AFUA. There's between 30 and 40 members. So AFUA's got access, to the people that we would like to sort of pilot the training on. So, it's taken us months of weekly meetings and what have you, but it's a really interesting initiative. So we've got, the first deck is on regulations. So we've been working hard on making it a bit, rendering it a bit more sort of teachable, if you like. And I think it's an interesting initiative. We, as you said, we're pre-piloting it here tomorrow with a group of AMP regulators or country members. So it's, I think it's interesting times, and there is a need to be a bit more systematic about this and not have sort of isolated training initiatives, and it's kind of that sort of sensitively standardizing approach. So, but anyway, I think it's a good example of where collaboration can get us. I think without that conversation, those training materials could have been sitting in a folder on a computer and not being used. So maybe another example is the help desk. It came out of our market sector review that it's a resource that needs to be revitalized. It has a role to play, but it's not just it's not just AMAP or AfDB that needs to develop those resources. It's not just a parking place for AfDB activities. It's also something that AMP could use. Whatever resources don't fit in the community of practice, or we look at, here's the help desk. What is the role of the community of practice? Let's do something complementary, not overlapping. And again, with AfDB's tariff tool, we could also put that on AfDB's help desk. So it's a collaborative exercise. We're sort of loosening up in terms of brand and ownership, and we're getting more from it. Okay, so that's really the end of the discussion. I think before we close, perhaps we could go to a Q&A if there are any questions from the audience. At anyone or all of us, please let me know. No. Yes. Sorry? Separately. Well, we fund it separately. We represent different organizations. So there's no sort of financial resources or funding involved in our collaborations. It's really just, getting more from the funding we have already. Are you talking about training, for instance?
In terms of the service delivery you are offering to all these members, is it free of charge at the point of service?
I'm not sure I understand.
I can answer that for you. Yes, that's the answer I'm going to hazard to say, because I can give you, for example, the tariff tool, the regulation generation tool. It's the same question they keep asking us. Are we going to buy this? We say, no, we have used our resources to do something for you that you would have spent money to do. So it's there for you to use it. So if you need the technical assistance, it's just you to reach out to us. And then in our collaboration, we will figure out, okay, how do we get the resources that are needed to provide the technical assistance to you. So it's not like you will pay us to provide this technical assistance to you.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up to that. Your technical assistance, is it request-driven? I mean, must a council come and request assistance, or you just get together and develop some ideas and put it out there?
It can go both ways. I mean, I speak more towards from Get Transform, but I think the modality is not so different. I mean, sometimes we have ideas based on work that we have done previously or which is ongoing, and we can always, so to say, bring this to countries that we are already working in, or bring it to our partners like AFUR or AMP and say, oh, hey, we have this interesting thing ongoing, and if maybe it is interesting to them, they can say, yes, we would like to implement this in our country as well. Or it can be also request-driven, for instance. So where, for example, AFUR has a lot of connections to the regulators and have regular meetings with them. And at our end also with the policy catalyst that I mentioned earlier, for instance, we would invite sort of an expression of interest and go through not an extensive, but like a short vetting process to see who could then be part of the cohort. So with the ongoing windows that I mentioned, for instance, we have 6 countries that are part of the cohort, and the representatives from these 6 countries are somewhere in the range of 35 to 40. So that's sort of like what we would usually cap at. So yes, it's kind of, it goes both ways. It's both request driven and from our side as well.
I think if I can just add, from AMAP side, it's also it's request driven. I mean, AMAP is grant funded. There are no costs for the country level beneficiaries. It's really, if countries reach out, particularly through the sort of AfDB country offices, etc., and they're looking for support at various levels, that's obviously for free. you know, if we've had the resources and time, but that's how it works.
I'm Bernard from Paras Energy. My question is to Samuel, African Forum for Utility Regulators. Like in Nigeria, most of the mini-grid system we have right now, we have customer dissatisfaction, paying for services and you're not getting exactly what you're paying for. There is a lot of dispute that is unresolved. And with what we have on ground, going to reach out to a lot of communities now to say, okay, we are bringing this kind of investment, you see a lot of setbacks and the unwillingness to even want to patronize you. So where can you come in to fill this gap?
Well, the answer that I could give, the way we would come in is definitely through your regulator, NERC. I can't say they are a very active member of R4. So it's about, if you reach out to them about some of these challenges, we can come in to maybe provide a bit of assistance on how to manage those challenges. Because I can tell you those challenges are not unique to Nigeria. It's just about going to most countries on this continent. You will find that level of dissatisfaction is usually there, but some regulators reach out to us. How do we resolve this issue? Yeah? And so we find ways, okay, can we help them? What kind of technical assistance do they need? I can give you the example, and we did this with again, the support of Get Transform at some point last year. NERC reached out to us. We need some sort of capacity building for our officials on how to help the sector. And we provided that technical assistance. So it is imperative on your shoulders to be as open and candid with your regulator, to maybe show them, okay, there's a gap here, there's a loophole here, and then encourage them and say, okay, if you don't have the capacity to improve it, maybe seek help, seek assistance, and that assistance can be through us, the African Forum for Utility Regulators. It can be through the collaboration with organizations, such as the 4 organizations represented here, or we can actually even pass it on and say, we don't have the capacity to do that. Perhaps AMP has the capacity, perhaps AfDB has the capacity. So that's how I would suggest that is answered. Yeah.
Thank you so much. From the panelists, I've been getting like words such as complementing each other, collaboration, capacity building, consultation. I just want to find out how is the capacity building done for the beneficiaries? In the needs assessments that are being done, is there some technical support that is being done for the beneficiaries as well? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones that end up maybe with the systems. Thank you.
No, that's a very important question, thanks. Indeed, I mean, the beneficiaries are not forgotten. So it's true that when we, it mostly now comes when we are doing pilots, right? You mean the beneficiaries like the communities, right? That benefit, yes. So indeed, so there are different ways that we can do that. But typically what we will do is that, you know, when the mini-grids are tendered, then it's going to be a request, you know, for the developers or whoever is implementing the mini-grids to have this capacity building to the communities. So this is something that has to be done. It will not be something optional. It has to happen. So this is one way. And of course, there are resources also in the budget to do that. And then also making sure, of course, that there is a representation of the beneficiaries in these different stakeholder platforms that we mentioned. For instance, the national dialogues, there will be also, you know, representatives from the communities to be able to also give their, you know, their opinion on what is being discussed and what would be needed. So yes, that is being, yeah, you know, we are the UNDP. We are of course very sensitive to the communities and to leave no one behind. That is our sort of motto, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My question goes straight to AFU. As a regulator point of view, we still have issue with consultancy and that of the developer that provide those facility for maybe for the regulators. There has been sometimes challenges where you provide a capacity building. For instance, now you have built an AFU 2, which is a tariff methodology across all Africa countries. And they haven't fully implemented the tariff 2, is now working. And somebody will come from C4 and do another studies. Oh, there's gaps in this 2, there's this. In fact, there's a need to review those kind of challenge. It happens with us when there was a tariff 2 designed for both Nigeria and Israel under the MCCU Compact project, and we implemented the 2. After 3 to 4 years, and they came C4D and another studies and discover a lot of gaps. That in fact the 2 is not transparent, there is no grant component, there is no capacity factor, there is no this. And we have to go back again and review the tariff 2 to actually match up all those gaps to identify those issues. So how do you really navigate those challenges with those that are really benefit from your capacity you're providing, and then innovations that's taking place, other person will just come and do another story. So there's issue, these 2, if these 2 cannot work here, how do you navigate within those challenges? Please, thank you.
All right, thank you for that interesting question. I would say that the way we dealt with it at R4 is that, and I hinted on it earlier, developing these tools, we have done it collaboratively. That's number one. I can tell you, for example, the mini-grid tariff tool. We spoke to donors, we spoke to funders, we spoke to developers, we spoke to regulators, we spoke to rural electrification agencies, we spoke to ministries of energy and to ministries of finance. So you're able to pick out what works for everyone. But also on top of that, designing this, you can't make everyone happy. So you would have to reach a bit of a compromise. I understand, I know the tool you're talking about, the issues that came up with it. On our end, it had to be a compromise. Regulators wanted a lot of data. Developers were saying it's too much data they're requesting for. We had to find a middle ground. But then in terms of developments and things like that, technology is always developing. That's why it's advisable. And like you said, 3-4 years down the road, you have to relook at it. Say, okay, is it still relevant? Are there aspects of, you use the example of the tool, are there aspects of this technology, the tool, that can be removed, can be updated? Are there things we can add? So as long as technology is evolving, you will definitely keep reviewing. But as long, the short answer to your question is, it was a collaborative effort to make sure that everyone felt we own this tool, we did this together. It's not something that came from heaven and was given to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want also to add that indeed, I mean, typically, you know, we don't pretend our technical assistants or tools or trainings are perfect. And in fact, the one that Robert mentioned, we are pre-piloting tomorrow with our audience is a typical example, because we know the material is very robust, you know, it has been really developed by experts, we know, you know, the content is there, but now how do you deliver it in a way that is really efficient? This is a different question. And that is why we really also need to get the feedbacks from the, you know, the people, the audience that we are training. So that is a message also to all of you when you benefit from some of these technical assistance. We are really welcoming feedbacks, even even if it's negative feedback, you know, in a sense that things can be, you can call it areas of improvement, so that it looks, you know, it sounds nicer, but in the end, it's really what we need, so that, you know, the next one will be better.
All right. Thanks for the responses. I think we are a bit short of time, so I think if there are no further questions, we should just wrap this up. So I just want to say thank you to the audience for joining us. It's not a finance session, so we didn't know what our pulling factor would be, but it's a good turnout. But no, thank you to the panelists. Thanks for coming along. I think it's been an interesting conversation, and thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.